You ever notice how the moment you stop caring, everything shifts? The way they look at you changes. The way they act around you shifts. The power they once held over you, gone. And it leaves them confused, unsettled, panicked. Because deep down, they relied on your attention, your reactions, your need for validation. And now, nothing. Just silence. Just indifference. Indifference is power, not apathy, not detachment from life, but the kind of power that comes from knowing your worth isn't determined by anyone else. It's the ultimate form of control, not over others, but over yourself. They sense it, and suddenly they feel lost without the control they once had. They scramble, they overthink, they try to reclaim that grip, but it's gone, and they panic. This is the power of Stoicism. The moment you stop caring about their opinions, their validation, their games, you reclaim your peace. And when you reclaim your peace, you become untouchable. They don't know how to handle it. They're used to the chase, the push and pull, the drama. But when all of that disappears, when you become the calm in the storm, they lose their footing. And in their confusion, they start chasing. They start craving what they once took for granted: your energy, your attention, your mind. There's something intoxicating about a person who no longer seeks approval. The energy shifts. You go from being someone who reacts to someone who observes. You go from being predictable to being a mystery. And people fear mystery. They fear what they can't control. They fear someone who doesn't play by the same emotional rules they do. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor. Surrounded by power struggles, deceit, and endless attempts to manipulate him, he remained calm. Why? Because he wasn't playing their game. He wasn't fueled by the need for approval or driven by the fear of rejection. He had mastered himself, and that mastery made him untouchable. That same principle applies to your life. The moment you stop playing their game, the moment you remove your emotions from the equation, everything changes. Imagine this. You once craved their validation. You wanted their approval. You overthought their words, their texts, their responses, and then one day, you stopped. Not because you were playing a game, but because you truly, deeply understood. None of it mattered. You realized your worth wasn't tied to their recognition. And that realization, that's the moment the power shifts. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering why you don't react the same way. They're the ones feeling uneasy because they lost something they didn't even realize they depended on: your attention. And here's where it gets interesting. They'll try to pull you back in. They'll test you, prod at you, try to evoke a reaction. They'll bring up old memories, remind you of past connections, throw subtle jabs to see if you'll bite. But when you truly embody the Stoic mindset, none of it moves you. You don't engage, you don't explain, you don't justify. You simply exist in your own space, unshaken, unbothered, and they panic. The people who once controlled you, the ones who once dictated your emotions, suddenly find themselves powerless. And that's the irony. The less you care, the more control you gain. The more detached you become from their expectations, the more they become attached to you. It's not magic, it's psychology. It's human nature. We crave what we can't fully grasp. We chase what seems just out of reach. And that's where your peace begins. Not in the chaos of emotions, but in the silence of indifference. Because the moment you realize that no one has power over you unless you grant it to them, you become untouchable. This doesn't mean you become passive or weak. On the contrary, it means you become deliberate. Every move, every word, every action, chosen with precision, not as a knee-jerk reaction to someone else's behavior. People expect you to react. They expect you to flinch, to argue, to defend yourself. That's how most of the world operates, on an endless loop of action and reaction, feeding off each other's emotions. But when you refuse to play that game, when you step back and observe instead of getting swept away, you become something else entirely. You become a force of nature. Think of the ocean. When it's calm, it's vast, still, powerful. It doesn't chase after anyone. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply is. And in that state, it commands the most respect. But the moment it's disturbed, when storms roll in, when the waves crash wildly, it loses that quiet power. It becomes reactive, chaotic. People fear it, but they don't respect it in the same way. The same goes for you. When you're centered, when you're in control, people don't just notice. they feel it, and they adjust accordingly. This is why the Stoic approach is a superpower in every aspect of life. Relationships, work, social interactions. Everywhere you turn, people are trying to pull you into their chaos. They want you to react, to validate their emotions, to get caught up in their drama. But the moment you refuse, the moment you maintain your stillness, the entire dynamic shifts. Take, for example, an argument. Most people fight to be heard, to prove their point, to assert dominance. But the Stoic listens, observes, and in many cases says nothing at all, because they understand that most arguments are not about truth, they're about ego. And the only way to win a battle of egos is to not participate at all. Silence is the most powerful response you can give. It unnerves people. It forces them to sit with their own words, their own energy. When you don't feed into their emotions, they have no choice but to reflect. And often, that reflection is more powerful than anything you could have said in retaliation. This is why the greatest leaders, the most influential thinkers, the most unshakable individuals throughout history have mastered this principle. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, all understood that the key to power was not in controlling others, but in controlling oneself. Because here's the truth. No one can truly control you unless you allow it. No one can disturb your peace unless you give them permission. And the moment you internalize this, you become unstoppable. Imagine walking through life with that level of composure. Imagine facing an insult and feeling nothing, not because you're suppressing emotion, but because you genuinely see it for what it is. Just words, just noise, just another person trying to project their own struggles onto you. Imagine dealing with a difficult boss and not being fazed because their frustration, their micromanagement, their insecurities are not your burden to carry. Imagine navigating relationships without the fear of loss, because you know that your worth isn't tied to someone else's validation. That is freedom. That is power. And it's not just about emotional control, it's about focus. The more you waste energy on reacting to nonsense, the less energy you have for things that truly matter. How much time do people waste each day arguing, defending, explaining, trying to change opinions that will never change? Hours, days, years. But what if you redirected that energy? What if, instead of getting caught up in the distractions, you use that time to build, to create, to grow? That's the difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The ordinary person is always caught up in the storm. The extraordinary one, they walk through it untouched. Of course, this doesn't mean becoming robotic or shutting off emotions. Stoicism is not about being numb, it's about being selective. Feel deeply, but only about things that deserve your energy. Care, but only about things that align with your values. Love, but from a place of abundance, not desperation. When you reach this level of detachment, you become a paradox. You care, but you're not attached. You engage, but you don't depend. You love, but you don't chase. And because of that, you become magnetic. People gravitate toward those who don't need them. They respect those who are self-sufficient, who stand firm in their own power. And, ironically, the less you seek validation, the more you receive it. But by the time you reach that point, you won't even care. Because the real prize isn't in how others see you, it's in how you see yourself. So, the next time someone tries to bait you into an argument, pause. The next time someone tries to guilt trip you, observe. The next time someone plays games with you, disengage. Watch what happens when you stop giving away your energy so freely. Watch how people scramble when they realize their usual tactics don't work on you. And most importantly, watch how much lighter, freer, and more powerful you feel when you finally take back control. That's the power of Stoicism. That's the ultimate flex.